I think this is a very bad thing.
Could I perhaps sum up our discussion by suggesting to you the proposition that the investor is a blessing rather than a liability to stamp collecting, Colin Such?
I think the investor is with us to stay, whether we like it or not. And my firm just hopes to guide him along the right and correct channels.
Ricky Richardson?
No, I'm afraid I don't see him as a blessing. I look upon him as a blessed nuisance.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Jill?
So it seems that if you really love stamps and enjoy the process of building up a collection, there can be no doubt that stamps can be an extremely valuable investment. If, on the other hand, you're simply a speculator trying to make a quick profit by investing in something you know nothing about, then you may get caught out. Be warned. Goodbye.
Collectors and investors are advised that there have been changes in the market value of the material discussed in that programme since it was first transmitted 2 years ago. Now on BBC1, the news headlines from Jan Leeming.
23 members of the Labour Party have finally resigned. 12 MPs, 9 peers and 2 former cabinet ministers. They'll now act together as a group, although they haven't yet formed a separate party. The group will be the third largest in the Commons, with 1 more member than the Liberals. The Liberal leader, Mr David Steel, nevertheless welcomed the Social Democrats' move. In the Commons, Mrs Thatcher has been defending her support for President Reagan's proposed multinational force to protect Western interests in the Gulf and elsewhere. The opposition leader, Mr Michael Foot, said Mrs Thatcher had exhibited bellicose demagogy in her support of the so-called Rapid Deployment Force, but the Prime Minister said she had not proposed anything new. 12 policemen were injured and 28 people arrested during a march through central London by about 3,000 West Indians. They were protesting against the police investigation of the fire 6 weeks ago in which 13 young West Indians died. The marchers alleged the fire was started by racists. The police say it was started deliberately, but they haven't said if they consider it was racially motivated. In Northern Ireland, all 400 Republican prisoners on the dirty protest at the Maze prison and in the women's jail at Armagh have decided to end their action. They say they'll stop fouling their cells so that attention can be concentrated on the hunger strike begun yesterday by Bobby Sands. In Egypt, the Defence Minister Ahmed Badawi and 13 other military commanders died when their helicopter crashed immediately after takeoff. General Badawi was regarded as a hero of the Arab wars against Israel. Teachers in England and Wales have accepted a 7.5% pay rise. They'd originally asked for twice that. And water workers in the northwest met today to decide whether to continue their unofficial strike. They've rejected a pay offer of just over 12%. Those in the northwest have voted to stay out, but others in the northeast and Yorkshire voted to return to work. That's all from us. Good night.
Before the weather, a brief look at our lineup for tomorrow night on BBC1. At 7:15, the American comedy series Taxi. In Sea Power at 7:40, Admiral of the Fleet, the Lord Hill Norton, traces the history of the gunboat. And then at 8:10, James Bolam stars as Jack Ford in another episode of When the Boat Comes In. After the 9 o'clock news, play for today at 9:25 is Sorry by Carol Bunyan, and follows the occupants of an office through a working day and their very different, and in one case traumatic, lunch hour. And at 11:05, Omnibus ventures into the puppet booth and traces the infamous career of Mr. Punch and his ill-fated companions. Programmes tomorrow night on BBC1. Details in Radio Times. Now, the weather outlook from Michael Fish.
Good evening to you. There's certainly been some pretty awful weather around today, as you may well have seen on the earlier news bulletins. In fact, in northeast England, where they've had 2 or 3 inches of rain, many of you have ended up with some floods. And indeed, that sort of weather is going to continue for a while, but very fortunately, the rain should be easing off during the night because the area of low pressure that's been responsible for it is continuing to move away eastwards into the continent. That, though, is not the end of the story, because as this area of low pressure moves away eastwards, so it's pulling in quite cold, stiff northeasterly winds, and it does look as if the weather will be fairly cold in all parts of the country in the next couple of days, although at least once that low's out of the way, it'll become dry in most parts, although northern Scotland may have to watch out, because in a couple of days' time perhaps there could be some snow moving down from the north, and we have frontal systems not too far away from southwestern parts that could bring them some rain on Thursday as well. But all that's a long way off. As far as the picture for midday tomorrow is concerned, it's just basically a fairly straightforward, quite strong, cold northeasterly flow over all parts of the country. Tonight, though, first of all, well, over Scotland and Northern Ireland, most of the rain has left off now, although the east of Scotland will stay cloudy, and there'll be a little bit of rain or sleet from time to time, but most other areas will see the cloud slowly breaking up, so that eventually you may well end up with some frost by the end of the night. Much of England and Wales, though, will be cloudy and not quite so cold, with some rain from time to time, still some fairly heavy rain in these more northern parts, with snow on the hills, although that tending to gradually ease off as the night goes on. And then tomorrow, well, we're going to have the bulk of England and Wales, I think, with a fairly cloudy day and quite a strong, raw northeasterly wind to go with it, with rain every now and again as well. Although in these northern and western parts of England and Wales, as the day goes on, the rain should ease off and gradually be replaced by somewhat drier and brighter weather. Scotland and Northern Ireland, the best of the weather, they're for the most part dry with some sunshine, although eastern parts of Scotland will have a good deal of cloud and one or two light wintry showers.
On Radio 2, after Midnight Newsroom, Brian Matthew continues with the arts magazine Round Midnight. And then at 2 o'clock, there's Patrick Lunt with You and the Night and the Music, right through until 5 a.m. Time now 2 minutes past midnight, and from all of us here on BBC1, a very good night. Good night